usefulness.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, we have Mr McDonald of Anglicare Victoria and Mr Dangerfield of Batcare Victoria. So perhaps if we can start with
The
Batcare.
with Batcare.
Yes.
So, Mr Dangerfield, do you wish to take the oath or the affirmation?
The oath, please.
Can you raise the Bible, please? You have it, thank you. And repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
The evidence that I will give.
In this Royal Commission.
In this Royal Commission.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You can replace the Bible and take a seat.
Thank you, Your Honour. Would you tell the Royal Commission your full name and occupation?
Graham Richard Dangerfield, Chief Executive of Batcare.
Thank you, Mr Dangerfield. Batcare has provided a submission to the Royal Commission in relation to these issues.
Yes.
Then you have a copy of that with you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand from that that Batcare is a welfare agency of the Baptist Union of Victoria.
That's correct.
And currently, in terms of your work in out-of-home care, you have 38 foster care placements with Batcare.
Yes.
Of which 25 are in general foster care.
That's correct.
And 13 are in intensive foster care.
Yes.
What does intensive foster care mean?
So that relates to foster care placements which have a higher level of complexity with the child.
Does that mean the child has a higher level of complexity?
That's correct.
In terms of the foster care placements of 38, do you have complete case management for those?
No. So currently we have 4 we case manage, and the other 34 we support.
How did that arrangement come about?
So that relates to whether generally where there has been a permanent placement order by the courts, we would then receive case management from the department. So it really is the status of each of those foster cares determines that.
Now, in terms of kinship care, you have a total of 63 children in your care.
That's correct.
And of those, there are 48 contracted cases in statutory kinship care.
That's correct.
And 15 placement establishment cases. What's a placement establishment case?
So we work with the children and the carers to establish the placement in kinship care for up to 6 months.
I see. And that's what you're contracted to do with the department?
That's correct.
So at the end of 6 months, those children become contracted cases or go elsewhere with the department. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that the usual number you have at any given time of placement cases?
Yes.
Are you contracted to have 15?
Yes.
In relation to the 48 contracted cases, they're ongoing?
Yes.
And do you share or have case management responsibility for them?
We have case management responsibility for all of those.
How long have you been operating in out-of-home care area?
I would need to check that.
Or decades or?
Yes.
Thank you. And according to your submission, you've got 37 offices and facilities across Victoria and Tasmania?
That's correct.
But not all of them are in relation to out-of-home care?
No, we only provide out-of-home care services in Western Melbourne, so not in Tasmania at all.
When you say Western Melbourne, do you mean the city of Melbourne, or you're referring to a larger area?
The west of Melbourne in terms of the region, the larger metropolitan area.
For those of us that don't come from Victoria, can you indicate the region that's covered?
It goes from Moonee Ponds out to Melton, I believe Wyndham.
And there's suburbs
That's right.
As opposed to regional cities.
That's correct. So it's suburbs. Yep.
Are you one of the smallest providers in terms of the region you cover in Victoria? Do you know?
I believe we're one of the major providers in the Western region.
Major provider within your region, but looking at Victoria as a whole, do most out-of-home care providers, to your knowledge, in Victoria cover a larger region than yours?
Yes, they would be represented in multiple regions. BapCare is only represented in one.
How did that come about?
That's come about from our, I guess, where the origins of our work commenced, and that commenced by the Baptist Church in the Moonee Ponds area, Aberfeldy, and so the work has grown since the mid-1980s to the program that it is today.
Do you have any intentions as an organisation to expand your work in out-of-home care?
We would like to, yes.
What impediments are there to you doing that?
Well, obviously, the placements need to be allocated by the department.
So it would mean renegotiating with the department as to the number of children you can have in your care?
That's right.
Is there anything stopping you doing that?
Well, it comes to those placements being allocated, and currently they're all allocated to providers.
So as you understand it, the number of children coming into care is sufficiently matched with the number of placements available in Victoria?
Well, evidence would indicate that there is greater demand, but in terms of the packages placements we offer, they're generally full.
You don't know whether there's room in the system for you to expand without taking children from other providers?
No, not aware of that.
Now, just coming to your responses that begin on page 30 in relation to reporting allegations, if you can come to that. I take it from paragraph 148 that if an allegation of sexual abuse of a child in out-of-home care is reported to BapCare staff, you tell the department in Victoria, that's right?
That's correct.
Immediately?
Yes.
And that's orally as well as presumably in writing?
Yes.
You also tell the police?
It will be determined with child protection whether they advise the police or BapCare will advise the police.
Well,
but in all cases, the police will be contacted and advised.
So if you look at paragraph 148, you say there an allegation of sexual abuse always also requires report to the police. So that requirement is not imposed on you, is it?
I would need to check that.
You then go on to say the pathway of reporting would be agreed between BapCare and the department according to the circumstances of the case. Do you see that?
Yes.
So is it the case that an allegation of sexual abuse must be reported to the police, leaving aside who does the reporting?
Yes, that is correct.
And the way in which it's decided who does the reporting is by discussion between BapCare and the department?
Yeah, and generally it's who has the case management responsibility and who has most of the details of the allegation to be able to provide that information to the police.
Well, if it's in terms of case management, the vast majority of matters that came to your attention would go to the department for them to report to the police.
That's correct.
And in terms of the detail, the person who received the complaint or the institution which received the complaint would necessarily have the most detail. Isn't that right?
So could you clarify that question?
You said that it depended who had the most detail about the complaint. Isn't it the case that the agency which received the complaint would have initially the most detail because they presumably had a discussion with the reporter?
Yep. So I guess in that instance, the police would then still make contact with BapCare for the information that they needed.
Once you report it to the department and you don't have case management, is that the end of your involvement?
No.
How are you involved after that?
So clearly, once the allegation has been made and we've reported that, we need to make sure that the child is safe. Mm-hmm. After that, we need to report to the police and to child protection, and then we need to complete an incident report and have that forwarded to the department. In terms of sexual abuse, those would generally occur within 24 hours.
When you say we need to make sure that the child is safe, if you don't have case management for the child, is that your responsibility or the department's responsibility?
I would need to check the specifics on that, but my understanding is that we would, as our obligation in terms of service provision, our duty is always to make sure that the child is safe in the first instance.
And is that a joint obligation with the department, which
I would say it would be shared, but I would need to check that.
Can you do that for us?
Mm-hmm.
Now, after you've completed your incident report, what involvement do you have in the assessment or otherwise of the allegation?
Okay, so if the allegation has been reported to police, we support the carer and the child and await the outcomes from the investigation by the police and child protection.
This is in cases where you don't have case management.
That would be, my understanding is in both circumstances.
Let's just concern ourselves with where you don't have case management. All right?
Okay, so that is where we are providing monitoring and support to the carer and the child, yes.
What monitoring and support do you provide to the carer?
So that's under our service provision with the department, so we would still have that responsibility to support.
What do you actually do with the carer?
So that would be our case manager would be meeting with the carer and the child and monitoring the placement.
Monitoring for what purpose?
To see if there's any issues to do with the placement, if there's any additional support that we can provide to the carer and the child.
When you talk about the carer and the child, I take it in those circumstances the carer is not the one against whom the allegation has been made.
So it depends on obviously who the allegation is against, whether it's a carer or whether it's another child or whether it's another adult or it's a staff member. So there's different processes we would then follow depending on who is the allegation is against.
Well, who were you thinking of when you said you support the carer and the child?
So that would be in the case of that obviously the allegation isn't against the carer.
How do you support the child?
So in terms of the child, it would be seeing if there's any, in the first instance, we would support the carer and the child through our therapeutic services and our senior practitioner, and we would see if there's any other supports that are needed to the child and through the placement.
What's the role of the senior practitioner?
So that's a BAP care role, and that's really part of a project, 2-year project we've been undertaking, that is to support our staff and our carers in terms of therapeutic support regarding trauma, including sexual abuse of children. So they would support the case manager and the carer in terms of strategies to support the child.
If the person against whom the allegation is made is a child within the placement, how do you deal with that?
So if it's under 10, then it's dealt with through therapeutic supports to the child and the placement. If it's greater than...
I'm sorry, let me stop you there.
Yep.
If it is under 10, are you referring to the child who's been abused or the child who's the abuser?
I believe it's both.
So if they are both under 10, then what do you mean by therapeutic supports to that child?
Well, we would need to assess that it is still safe for that child to remain in the placement, whether there are other children. There may be a need to put in place a safety plan in that circumstance, and then counselling and therapeutic supports as needed.
So that child is referred to the alleged abuser or the abused?
That would apply to both.
So whether it's safe for one or other of them to be in the placement?
Yeah, and if we would work with child protection in regards to that, and if it was deemed that it wasn't appropriate for the placement to continue, then there would be obviously a change in placement. But our primary goal always is to try and keep families together. And we would support the care in terms of strategies to support that.
Do you have within BAP Care a particular therapeutic model of providing care?
No, that's been part of our development in this project. So, and we're looking to review that project in July this year, the outcomes from the project.
What project?
So this is our own therapeutic support project that we've had in place for 2 years now.
By project, you mean you're considering whether or not you should have a therapeutic support model, and if so, what it will look like?
No, we've had a senior practitioner working alongside our staff and carers. We have one in Tasmania and we have one in Victoria, and we offer that support and services across all of our family and community services programs.
When you say that support and services, are you talking about therapeutic support consistent with a model, or just generally therapeutic support?
I would need to clarify that, but in terms of they're providing the first response support to carers and staff in response to trauma that is being experienced by children.
By therapeutic, do you mean counselling, psychologists, medical personnel, to the extent they need it?
So not in terms of the specialists, and they would be referred to. So this is really supporting our carers and our staff. So they provide mentoring, coaching, training, and in very limited circumstances they've worked directly with carers and a child.
So when you're talking about they there, are they your staff?
That's right.
So your staff provides support which you refer to as therapeutic?
Yep.
Excuse me. And if outside specialists are required, that is brought in as needed?
Yep.
Are you aware that Victoria as an agency has a therapeutic model?
I couldn't answer that.
Have you spoken to the department about the way in which they deal with allegations in order to gain information about how you should?
I don't know that answer, so I don't need to get back to you on that.
It would be sensible, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because the department would have significantly greater experience than BAP Care, wouldn't it, in terms of out-of-home care services and dealing with allegations?
Yes, but I think from what you've heard is across, in terms of best practice, is agencies, certainly the community service organisations, have all implemented a range of therapeutic practices and supports in addition to support their out-of-home care placements.
Well, when you say that all community service organisations have, you mean that each of them has caseworkers who engage with the child in order to ensure the safety of the child in the placement and to deal with any emotional or otherwise consequences of the child?
Yeah. So in terms of BAP Care, we have 2 additional specialists, clinical specialists, who are there to support our carers and staff.
When you say additional clinical specialists, what's their specialty?
In trauma, trauma experienced by children. So that's their expertise.
And they're brought in cases where there's been an allegation, is that right?
So they're available to be accessed by the carers or the case managers as they require the support.
Do you tell the birth parents when an allegation is made of a child in your care, even though you don't have case management for the child?
One of the responses in terms of an allegation would be to advise the care team, and parents can be part of that care team.
And the care team is run by the department rather than you?
That's correct.
Are you able to tell us the number of allegations of sexual abuse in relation to a child in care that have been made in relation to children in your care, albeit not case managing them, over a period of time that you can nominate?
So there are 2 incidences.
Over what period of time?
So that's over the time period that the Royal Commission requested, so I think that's over
10 years?
10 years.
When were those incidents reported?
I would need to check that information. That was certainly provided to the Royal Commission, those 2 cases.
You can't tell us now whether they're recent or more historic in nature?
They would be more recent, so they would be in the last 4 years, so certainly since 2010.
And those allegations were conveyed to BAT Care, that's right?
I'm just going to recall, so yes.
And they were about children who were in out-of-home care in a placement run by BAT Care?
Yes.
What was the allegation in each case?
So one case was a young girl who complained, or not complained, but expressed discomfort in terms of a sore vagina. And that was followed up in terms of the child provided a couple of names in terms of who the perpetrator might have been, but after review of all people who could be in contact, that were in contact with that child, it was not able to be substantiated who that person was.
Who conducted that investigation and formed the view it wasn't able to be substantiated?
That was... I would need to check that, but I understood that that investigation would be undertaken by Child Protection and BAT Care.
Well, when you say you'd need to check, was the routine in the last 4 years that an allegation like that would have been investigated by a combination of the Child Protection and BAT Care workers?
Yes, in terms of, I guess, the categorisation of that incident.
Well, I'm not with you there, Mr. Dangerfield. Is it the case that that allegation was reported to the police?
I believe so, but I would need to...
In accordance with what you've already told us, it would have to have been,
yes.
wouldn't it?
No.
Are we right in assuming that it would have been?
Yes.
Was there an investigation taken independently of what the police were doing?
Yes, and I believe there was also a review by the police, but because they couldn't identify the persons, and also that there was a couple of names provided, it wasn't able to be substantiated.
So is it the case that the police made the decision not to take it further?
Yes.
Not BAT Care?
That's correct.
And not the department?
Yes.
Now, are your policies to report directly to the police or to the department, and then in discussion with the department work out who's to report it?
I believe our policies are to report it to Child Protection, and we also have an obligation to make sure it is reported to the police.
Do you know what happened to the child who made the disclosure in the case you've told us about?
No.
What was the other case?
The other case, the other case was in foster care, and so that was a child made a disclosure to that while she was attending another family visit, that one of the adults in that family inappropriately touched her.
When you say she was in foster care, where was the first child who made the allegation?
So the first one was foster care, the second one was kinship care.
I see. Now, while she was attending another family visit, is that what we'd understand to be an access visit or unrelated family?
It was an access visit to the grandmother.
I see. What happened with that allegation?
Obviously it was reported to police. The allegation, I believe there was no evidence to support the allegation. So there was no criminal charges recorded against the person.
Now, what you've just told us is what you were told by the police?
Yes.
Did you do anything internally in relation to that allegation?
So, Child Protection and BAP Care, well, through Child Protection there was a court order was obtained that prevented that adult being in the home when that child was having access visits. And certainly the actions that was taken was to make sure that the child was safe and protected.
When you say Child Protection and BAP Care, who made the application, Child Protection or BAP Care?
Child Protection would.
Now, in addition to having made that order or having had that order made, what, if anything, did you do with that child?
So we certainly supported the carer in that kinship arrangement, and but I would need to probably get back to you in terms of the specific therapeutic supports that were provided to the child.
Did you make any changes to your practices or processes after the first allegation was made?
No.
I beg your pardon?
No.
Did you in relation to the second allegation?
No.
Do you have a system in place whereby you review systems as a result of allegations?
Yes. So that starts. So all of our incidents are reported into an organisational-wide incident management system, and they are reported to our Quality and Clinical Governance Board Committee.
When you say organisational-wide, is that BAP Care as you've described it? It's not broader than that?
No. And so that's reported to our Quality and Clinical Governance Committee. So every incident, because this would be an incident relating to abuse, so that would be reported to that.
Well, what did your Quality and Clinical Governance Board Committee do about each of these allegations?
So we would report to the committee the incidences. They would remain open in terms of the reporting to that committee until the case is closed in terms of the police investigation is completed.
So is it the case that that committee did nothing in relation to the allegations once the police investigation was completed?
That's not the role of the committee provides the governance oversight. I would need to confirm what actions as an organisation we took.
Well, what's the point of telling that committee of the allegations unless they had some responsibility or role in relation to responding to them?
Well, certainly there is, those incidences are reviewed by the committee. So, and they would review both our compliance in terms of systems, process, procedure, and did we adhere to those, and if there was any areas for improvement, that those improvements would be undertaken.
Well,
understanding that with every action of abuse, incident of abuse, there is a root cause analysis undertaken by the organisation, and that would also be reported to the board, and that would identify recommendations for improvements where there's been gaps in our systems.
Well, can you provide us with the root cause analysis that was undertaken in respect of each of those incidents?
We can provide that, yes.
Can you also provide us with any material generated by the committee in terms of its review of compliance arising from each of those issues?
We can.
Thank you.
Mr. Dangerfield, just for context, you've indicated there were 2 sexual abuse allegations in the last 10 years, but particularly since 2010. You also receive incidents or allegations in relation to physical abuse and other abuse in children in care. Can I just get some understanding of the number of incidents that you would deal with in relation to out-of-home care through your systems?
So there were 6 others that were identified that met that criteria in terms of sexual behaviours or child on child.
Sorry, in addition to the 2 that you
That's
referred
correct.
to, Ms. Fernandez, you're saying there's an additional 6?
That were not deemed to be part of the criteria that was required to be reported to the Royal Commission.
But you've described them as sexual behaviours.
Yes, or child on child.
I'm not sure, but Ms. Fernandez may be able to clarify. I would have thought we had requested that information, but put that aside. In addition to those 6 sexualised behaviours, matters, you also have physical abuse that would take place within out-of-home care.
So yes, okay, yeah.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the nature of the organisation. I know it's only a relatively small agency in relation to out-of-home care. It's quite a large agency in the delivery of disability and aged care.
That's correct.
And you have incident management strategies which you've identified. I'm just trying to understand the sorts of numbers of incidents that you would deal with on an annualised basis just in the out-of-home care field. So I was just trying to get some understanding.
In terms of the incidences reported to our quality and clinical governance, they would be, there would probably, in the last 12 months, there might be 2 or 3 incidences.
Out-of-home care.
That's right. So it is very infrequent.
Okay, thank you for that.
In relation to the other 6 that you believe didn't meet the definition of sexual abuse that the Royal Commission provided you with, were each of those reported to the police?
I believe so.
What was the outcome of the police investigation in each of them?
I would need to, I don't have that information with me today, but I would need to confirm that. But they weren't, none of those incidents were proven allegations, or they were child on child or sexualised behaviours that we've reported to child protection during that time.
So is it the case that you believed that there was no relevant at the time criminal offence for the police to charge the offender with.
That's correct for those 6, yes.
So what did you, as an organisation, do in respect of those 6 matters?
I don't have that information with me, but we could certainly provide that to you.
Did you have a practice or procedure at the time? And I'm assuming that these also happened in the last 4 years, is that right?
Yes.
Whereby you dealt with a child with sexualised behaviours in a particular way?
So can you just clarify that question?
Certainly. You've described those 6 allegations as being either child-on-child abuse or a child with sexualised behaviours. That's right. Did you, at the time the allegation was made, have a policy or practice in place as to how you dealt with a child with sexualised behaviours who was in out-of-home care?
Absolutely.
What was that?
So in terms of children with sexualised behaviours, we support the carer in terms of certainly supporting the child in the placement.
Do you actually have a policy that sets out what it is you do in those circumstances?
I would need to check that and confirm that with you.
As I understand it from the policies that you provided to us, there is no specific matter concerning child-on-child abuse. Would you disagree with that?
No.
In relation to a child with sexualised behaviour, it's also the case that from the policies you provided to us, we couldn't discover any specific mention of that. Do you agree with that?
Yep. Yes.
So given that there's nothing in policies about those 2 matters, is there a practice that that care has indicated to its staff it should follow if a child in out-of-home care has sexualised behaviours or there is an allegation of child-on-child abuse?
Yes, there's well-established practices that we follow.
And those well-established practices haven't been reduced to writing?
No, but we can provide that.
What can you provide?
The practices that are followed.
When you say you can provide the practices, I think you've agreed with me that there's nothing in the policies about it. So how are you proposing to provide the practices to us?
I would need to check this, but we can document what is the practice that is followed by staff.
So you're suggesting creating a document which you would tell us reflects the practices which are followed? I
would need to check this for you.
What part of it are you checking for me, Mr. Dangerfield?
The documentation of the practice for our staff in terms of following up where there's cases of sexualised behaviour.
I think you've agreed with me that there is no written material about that practice, that's right?
Yes, but we will check that. I will also check that.
When you looked at the data for the Royal Commission and you discovered those 2 cases that you believe fitted within what was sought, and the additional 6 of sexualised behaviour or sexual exploitation, was that the first time that your agency knew of that data not in an individual sense of each allegation, but putting it all together?
Yes.
What did you do with that knowledge as an organisation?
So could you clarify the question, please?
Once you were aware of that data in the form in which you provided it, what did you do with that knowledge?
We have certainly, in the last 4 weeks, we have reviewed all of our policies, procedures, and we've noted that there is a couple of gaps where we can improve. So there's certainly, we don't have currently a policy around sexual exploitation, and so we need to, as an organisation, have that in place. And we've also identified 2 areas that we could certainly improve on, which is the investigation and the documentation of the investigation process. That is for an internal accusation against a staff member, and also our root cause analysis process.
Is there a document that records the outcome of that review?
Not at this stage, no.
How did you convey the outcome of the review to those who needed to know in the organisation?
So that was undertaken by our quality manager.
So he just told individuals in the organisation what the result was?
She undertook that review of our systems and processes.
But how did she convey the outcome if it's not a written document?
At this stage, it's been a verbal advice.
To whom?
To myself and to the senior family and community service managers.
Is there any oversight in Victoria of the delivery of your out-of-home care?
Oversight by?
Anyone?
So there's obviously the oversight by the department.
And when you say the department oversights what you do, what form does that oversight take? Are there audits of your practices? Do they review files?
So we do have a number of accreditations that and registrations that we comply with.
So you're accredited as an out-of-home care provider?
Yep.
And as a result of that accreditation, are there audits or spot checks or things of that like that are done by the accrediting agency?
Yes, there's an annual, I believe, three-yearly audit. We also have our own internal audit team that audit our systems, processes and compliance to those.
Did the internal audit team complete an audit as a result of the 2 incidents you've referred to?
I would need to check that and provide that advice to you.
Who else oversights you other than the department? Do you know?
No, I'd need to confirm that with you.
Now, I understand that the definition that was provided to you as part of the notice was any act which exposes a child to or involves a child in sexual processes beyond his or her understanding or contrary to accepted community standards. Do you accept that?
Yes.
In your view, does that definition include sexual exploitation?
Yes.
And does it include child-on-child abuse?
I would need to... Well, yes.
Can you tell us why we weren't provided with all of the 8 incidents?
So when BAPCare did its review of incidences, it came up with the 8 and contacted the department to verify that that was consistent with the data that was being provided to the Commission and based on the definitions that was defined, and they said that was 2 incidences that met that criteria.
Why did you contact the department?
So there was one was obviously consistency of data, but also from the period prior to 2010, we're reliant upon the department system to identify incidences.
And you didn't identify any incidences prior to 2010, did you?
That's correct.
If the data was inconsistent, that could be a relevant factor for the Royal Commission, couldn't it?
I think there certainly is a consistency of data and accessing data that's been certainly identified.
Well, the issue is you contacted the department to determine consistency, and then because the department told you something, you as a result provided information to the Royal Commission that was consistent with what the department told you. That's right?
That's correct.
You accepted their advice as to what the definition should be of the material sent to the Royal Commission?
That's correct.
And you didn't query that in relation to the 6 incidents, which you now say you think includes?
Well, we understand that they were having discussions with the Royal Commission with the data issues. So we felt that they were best placed to understand what the criteria the Royal Commission required.
Can I ask you to provide us with the same detail we sought in relation to the 6 other
Absolutely.
matters?
We have that information in that format. Yes, we'll provide that.
Thank you. Well, perhaps when you have that material ready, if you can inform the relevant person you've been dealing with here, and we'll provide you with a notice in respect of that information. Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. In relation to Mr. Dangerfield.
Could I ask this question just in relation to BAPCare? BAPCare, as you say, is a functionary of the Baptist Union of Victoria, and it's also a functionary of the Baptist Union of Australia. By that, are there other BAPCares around Australia that deliver out-of-home care?
To my understanding, there's only one other state, but I would need to confirm that.
And so by that answer, I presume that there's been no coordinated approach by the Baptist Church or the Baptist Union of Australia in relation to the Royal Commission and all issues relating to out-of-home care?
That's correct.
And in relation to other services, is there any mechanism by which the Baptist Union of Australia either informs or guides or provides a forum by which community service organisations associated with the Baptist Church meet and discuss matters of mutual interest?
Not directly.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps if Mr. McDonald can be sworn.
Yes. Mr. McDonald, do you wish to take the oath or the affirmation?
Take the oath.
Can you raise the Bible, please, and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
In this Royal Commission.
In this Royal Commission.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you. If you replace the Bible and take a seat, please.
Thank you, Your Honour. Would you tell the Royal Commission your full name and occupation?
Paul McDonald, CEO, Anglicare Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. How long have you been CEO of Anglicare?
Just over 5 years, 5.5 years.
Prior to that, did you have experience in the child protection area?
Yes, I was the Executive Director of the Children, Youth and Family Division of the Department of Human Services for some 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was Executive Community Care Manager of the Northwest Region of the Child Protection or the Children, Youth and Family Services. And then going back further into my career with child protection, I originally was a youth officer in the Brunswick Youth Welfare Service.
I'm sorry, a youth officer in the...
Brunswick Youth Welfare Service.
Thank you.
Originating, and they'd been my departmental roles.
And in each of those roles in the department, you were exposed to children in out-of-home care?
I was.
Thank you. Now, you've provided us with a submission on behalf of Anglicare.
Anglicare Victoria.
Yes, Anglicare Victoria. Do you have a copy of that with you?
Yes, I do.
Now, you say that Anglicare Victoria is Victoria's largest out-of-home care and family welfare provider, and that each night you have over 400 children under your care. Is that right?
That's correct, though the numbers have changed, and I can give you a breakdown of those.
Thank you.
If you like, yeah. Well, as from Friday, March the 13th, we had 63 children and young people in residential care. We had 300.
Sorry, if you could just go a little bit slower for
Sorry.
me. So as of the 13th, you had
63 children
in residential
care, and 331 in foster care. And some of those would be made up a lead tenant, but that would only be some 12 children, so it would be 331 total of foster care and lead tenant. And then a further 142 in kinship care. So directly, if I could put it like this, directly in the supervisory of out-of-home care, around 400, but further 142 in kinship care, of which of that total number, 241 are contracted to Anglicare Victoria.
Of those numbers,
Yes.
who do you have case management for, and who does the department have case management for?
The breakdown, if I can take it by home-based care type, of the 331 in foster care, we have 124 that we case manage ourselves or case manage on behalf of the department, 90 of the 142 in kinship care, and 25 of the 63 in residential care.
So just under half? Is that
just about
right?
under half. It's about 44%.
How's that determined between you and the department?
There's no strict formula. If I could take it by home-based care, there's a tendency, I would say, in Victoria to, because of the larger number that and our care of foster carers, we've worked out with the department, we've contracted the ability that they say, can you case contract a formula to foster care? In residential care, it's generally the same. It's often seen as this is an outdated formula, about 50-50. And in kinship care, a majority would be under our care, though the majority of kinship care in Victoria is delivered by the department.
Given your experience before this position and in the 5 years you've been in this position, can you offer any observations on the safety of children in out-of-home care provided by the non-government sector or the government sector?
Well,
particularly in regard to our issue, which, as you know, is child sexual abuse.
Child sexual abuse. Victoria has a history that, in the main, it's delivered its out-of-home care services by the non-government sector. The observation one would make there is that the history of charitable agencies in Victoria go back some 100, 120 years. And so the growth of the number of organisations that are still delivering do have long histories, and thus began in what I'd call the institutional care arrangement for many of those agencies, and then they've developed into being home-based care as it's de-institutionalised for Victoria. So though the department was delivering quite a number of parallel to the non-government sector, we're delivering a number of residential care units, certainly in the minority, and increasingly, apart from, I think it's about 26 beds, I could be wrong there, but increasingly they started to move that delivery across to the non-government sector. For a number of reasons, and I'll make some general observations from my time in the department, that in the units that I oversaw the movement across to the non-government sector, the observation I made at that time in the department was that our ability to be nimble enough to respond to children in residential care and their particular need, and the type of service system we can, I suppose, vacuum into the residential care was limited. And I was making the observation that the non-government sector had that possible, more in touch with some of the multidisciplined services, certainly particularly for young people. And I'm not just talking about therapeutic and clinical here, but I'm talking about the ability to offer recreation, education, lifestyle type options for children, that I thought there was a greater capacity within the non-government sector to deliver that for particularly young people. And I think the other observation that Victoria has made is that we need to be clearer in the out-of-home care of roles, and delivery of roles. And I think the department has long had the decision that it would prefer to supervise, monitor, rather than run out-of-home care, to clarify where the roles are, and thus the contract engagement and interaction between purchaser and provider.
Are there any measures that you can think of that would assist in an understanding, in the context in which this Royal Commission is working, as to whether a child is safer in one or the other?
Well, certainly one can obviously go to Category 1 incidents, but reasonably interpretive, and they're quite a blunt instrument, if I could say, because most, if not all, the Category 1 incidents, as we define it in Victoria, are written within 24 hours and don't capture the context. So I think that would be an inaccurate measure about whether they're declining or inclining. I think that we would tend to say that I'd prefer to measure the outcome of the delivery of a child in out-of-home care when you talk about safer, if I could put it like this, not only on incidents of abuse and sexual abuse, but certainly in relation to activity, in relation to social activity about who they're mixing with, and in relation to their education and life outcomes. Now, can we measure that is being achieved any better within a government arrangement or in a non-government arrangement? I would have the observation that a better system happens when at least one provider is delivering that, rather than you've got this dual track or parallel provision of care that you sometimes see in the disability sector, where departments running community residential units and the sector's running community residential units. I tend to think it distracts the bureaucracy into am I a purchaser here or am I a provider? And that's one of the observations that I think young children and young people get lost in, that jungle of purchaser-provider, and the need to actually be the guardian for that children in this sort of complex system.
By Victoria being in a position where the vast majority of care is provided by the non-government sector, does that role confusion happen less?
I think it does happen less. I think it could. I'll make this observation that it does happen less and could happen lesser, sorry, or on less occasions.
Fewer occasions.
Yes, on fewer occasions. If we started to be clear about what the role of a child protection service is and what the role of a provider of out-of-home care is, I think there's a case to get even clearer about those roles, so that then the onus or the provision for the child protection is statutory forensic investigation and seeing those cases through the court and delivering. If I can put it in this language, child protection are very good at the front end of that and excellent, and that's where we want them to be. I think the whole business of child protection delivery gets a bit distracted for the children who are requiring methodical case management and care in a system that's quite directed up to the investigative, urgent and crisis end. And that would be an observation that I would say that in these times the conversation should be had, and I think this is nationally, what role is best fitted to what provider, what tasks are best fitted to who's delivering those roles. And I still think that it's somewhat confused, though it's less confused when you have an out-of-home care sector so clearly defined and a child protection service so clearly defined.
So would you answer that question by saying the non-government sector, or even limited to Anglicare if you wish, is a better provider of support for children and carers in out-of-home care than the government, which is best placed to provide statutory child protection services?
Yes, I would. We're not a bed of roses here, but I would say that we're a better provider in the sense of the nimbleness and flexibility and range of services we can deliver in a non-government environment than in a delivery of residential care or out-of-home care in a government environment.
You talk about nimbleness. is it your observation that what prevents departments from being nimble is the various compliance requirements that are placed on government, not just legislatively based, rather than those on non-government organisations?
That's true. I think that in my experience of overseeing the child protection workforce, and at that time we had about 1,200 in the division I was responsible for, they were more and more dragged towards the screen, if I could put it like that, more and more dragged towards compliance, because the risk management and risk effect and to good workers, and it's a very good worker, it's a very good workforce, but they are required to, and quite rightly so for a lot of safety and risk reasons, to comply to a number of policies that the non-government sector also in its own way are complying to, but has that ability to actually not have such a large sort of, if I could put it like this, bureaucratic sort of pressure on it to deliver those sort of administrative requirements. I think when you talk about roles, if I could, there's some difficulty also about the delivery of out-of-home care in the purchasing placement sense within a department. There's an argument to say that you place the placement end within a department separate to the child protection end, even though it's in the same tent of the department, if you're following me. Now, the observation I would make is that the placement end is requiring to fill those beds, and the demand in that placement coordination unit, as we call it in Victoria, is to fill the available bed, and it's a demand-driven system. The role of child protection is to look after that case. It's a quality-delivered system. And I would say at times there are days in this system in which demand trumps quality. And that is that the placement, the need to place the child in the bed is of a higher priority than the quality issues in that placement of the bed. So one of the architectural problems or issues we have to face is it best to have a placement coordination unit outside a child protection context or inside a child protection context?
Where is it now? Inside?
In Victoria, it's outside. It's separate to the child protection functioning, so separate management arrangements. And I quite understand what are the requirements or the bottom lines that require that. But it has implication in relation to whether we're mixing and matching correctly in an in-demand system. And it's growing at 4 to 5% per annum.
In the Victorian system, is it the case that the department determines which child will go with which placement, and you are then informed of that and you manage and assess thereafter?
Yes, yes, that is generally the rule, though agencies and providers, and I'll speak on behalf of Anglicare Victoria, we also are part of the discussion about whether to accept or not. And certainly we would have an internal assessment that we've developed over the last year and a half that assists to minimise incidents or to add to the threshold, is this the right mix or match as but certainly the pressure to take the child into the bed is certainly very real.
Well, and the pressure on you is a financial one as well, isn't it? That you've been contracted to provide a certain number of placements, and if you have a placement available and you don't take it, there are consequences?
Well, there are consequences. Well, I mean, the department's got flow problems, and you have to understand that. And it's grown at 4 to 5%. And if you have a look at the Victorian Auditor General's report on residential care, I think they looked at 2012-13, of which 459 beds were planned, like budgeted in, but in fact 508 were alive. So that's about a 10% underfunding. Now that money comes from elsewhere within a department, but it's not planned. And thus we see by stealth residential care growing because we see things called contingency or emergency placements needing to be developed, because if a provider is saying, no, look, the house is unsettled, a fourth child just is not conducive, the department, generally speaking, there will be some interaction, but they'll accept that and then move to an emergency placement development, or try another provider. Certainly, though, it's very real. I mean, we're contracted by the department. We need to provide those beds. I just don't think that mixing and matching is, in a demand-driven system, is probably prioritised as sometimes it should.
I know the time.
Yes, right. We'll take the lunch adjournment now until 2. Thank you.